Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. Howdy, Glenys.
Hello. So happy to be here.
I know. How you been?
Pretty good. Pretty busy. Seeing clients. The summer is over and people are coming and it's fantastic. So, but I still have spots available to see people who are in need of help with their eating, specifically binge eating disorder, emotional eating, overeating, feelings of food addiction, and especially if you are in a larger body, I am here to help you.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that you're really doing a great job and your practice is growing pretty consistently. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. And you as well, I hear.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm a work in progress for sure.
You're killing it.
Yeah, definitely. Like the fall speaking tour is in full swing. I think the next place I'm going is Atlanta, and I'll be there in the middle of November. So I'm excited to go out there and speak.
Exciting. Yeah. I always see on your Facebook page, like all these photos of where you've been and at conferences and stuff. And I get a little bit of conference envy. I'm like, oh, everybody's there. And then I just remember, like, I really hate flying. I really hate traveling. I do have another job that I can't get a lot of time off from right now. So I'm like, okay, Glenys, it's okay. Just look and, live through them vicariously.
Listen, there's a lot of, yes, I've gone a lot of places, especially this October. And you're right. There's a benefit to like seeing some folks and meeting new people. But yeah, it is taxing, and it's a lot to be away from the people that you care about, and traveling on the plane is a whole thing. We'll do a whole episode on that at some point. But again, I'm thankful that I get the opportunity to do it. It's a lot of privilege to be able to sort of be asked to do this, and I'm really thankful for it. Yeah, and things are going well at Center for Discovery, and again, yeah, I have some spaces in my practice as well. I'll probably be doing another men's group, Body Trust men's group at the beginning of the year. We're just wrapping up one right now, and they're always so amazing. So I'm keeping plugging along.
Yes, and we are lucky people because we get to do the work we love.
Heck yeah, and I will say it again every time I go somewhere and I speak. And I say, oh, I'm the co-host of Dietitians Unplugged. I get woo-woo or something, like people are listening. So
yes,
so that's great.
I get the nicest emails from people, and I was somewhere too, and the presenters were like, "And I love your podcast," and I was so excited that like the presenters of this talk had listened to us. So
yeah,
so this is some of the work we love too. So happy to be 100%. Here. Happy to talk to everybody. And today we have kind of an exciting episode, I think. We are kind of comparing diet culture to cults, actual cults. We have Dr. Natalie Feinblatt here, who is a clinical psychologist here in Los Angeles. This is one of her specialties. So she has several, areas that she works in, but this is one of her specialties. And I met her and we had some coffee because we're kind of in the same neighborhood. And she had brought this up. She'll tell kind of at the end of this podcast, how this came about. But I said, we should totally talk about the relationship between diet culture and cults, and you're the person to do it. So I think it's a pretty cool episode.
I agree. I mean, I once once people hear so many of these connections, light bulbs are just going to be going off for folks. So this is a really great one, bringing this one to us, Glenys.
Yeah. And so let me just read Dr. Natalie Feinblatt's bio. And she said we can call her Natalie, which is so nice. Dr. Natalie Feinblatt is a licensed clinical psychologist who sees clients in Los Angeles and virtually. She specializes in treating addiction, trauma, co-occurring disorders, LGBTQIA plus clients, and former cult members. She's been working in the field of mental health for over 15 years at all levels of care and earned her doctorate at Pepperdine University. And you can learn more about her practice at her website, drnataliefeinblatt.com, and we will link to everything in the show notes as well if you want to find those links.
Yeah. So you all are really going to enjoy this one. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Natalie Feinblatt.
Well, welcome, Dr. Natalie Feinblatt, to our podcast. Natalie, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with us.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking.
So, can you give us a little bit of history of sort of how you came into this work, your HAES journey? And I am really interested in hearing about how you came to specialize in treating, among many other things, people escaping cults. So that was like a 3-part question I just gave you. So you can
just answer all those, and then we're done. That's the whole.
Just kidding.
Okay, I can. Perfect. Yeah. No, I could probably talk about all that for a long time. So the HAES portion, that is more of a personal thing for me than a professional thing, because I do not specialize in treating eating disorders or disordered eating or body image or anything like that. But I have my own personal journey, which I can briefly summarize as to how I came to this point of view. And also, even if you don't specialize in eating disorders, because we're all soaking in diet culture all the time, that stuff still comes up with clients about weight gain or weight loss or body image. So I do bring it in when that comes up, but that's just not the focus of my work. So I've had my own history of, getting, luckily I was an intuitive eater and very oblivious to food and eating issues on a personal level, probably until my mid-20s, which I am extremely grateful for because I know a lot of people get hit with it a lot younger than that. And I got sucked into the world of diets at that time. And I spent probably like close to a decade in the whole diet culture cycle of, diet, fail. And then finally, because I am personally involved in 12-step programs, I specialize in treating addiction, and I'm, don't hide from my clients if they ask that I've been a long time 12-stepper myself. I eventually got led to Overeaters Anonymous, and I did that for a good number of years. And looking back on it, I think that program was founded with the best of intentions, but like anything else in our culture that is not anti-diet culture, it's gotten sucked into diet culture as well. And so I finally got exposed to like body positivity, fat liberation, HAES, etc. I think kind of the gateway for me was my feminism. And so I eventually kind of got more and more into that. And it really started to hit me that I needed to practice what I preached. And I was essentially restricting and dieting. And that's when I kind of started my own intuitive eating journey. And I don't know, I guess I've been in the world of intuitive eating and HAES for probably like 3 or 4 years at this point. So that's a very, very briefly encapsulated version of my HAES journey. And then the cult stuff. So it all started actually when I was about 10 years old. I've told this story a number of times, and I finally went back and looked up some of the dates, and I was like, wow, this started when I was 10. Okay, goodness gracious. So my father worked in the film industry his whole career. And when I was 10 years old, he worked on a Tom Cruise movie called Days of Thunder. It's not one of his more like blockbuster movies. It was one where he played a NASCAR driver.
Yeah, I think it was a huge movie though, and I remember seeing it on a terrible date. So I have like a terrible association with that movie. But yes,
Yeah.
Days of Thunder.
I will watch that movie if it's on TV, like every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I will tell my friends all the time, like, Cole, I want you to hit the pace car. What? Cole, I want you to hit the pace car. Yeah, no, yeah.
No, we all have those movies that regardless of the quality, if it's on TV, you leave it on. So yeah, and I remember I was a pretty precocious kid, and I remember the adults I was around at the time talking about how Tom Cruise was a Scientologist. And being a curious kid, I would ask, what is that? And nobody could answer my question. And it was very strange to me that all of these adults knew the name of this thing, but nobody could actually tell me what it was. I don't know if anybody said at the time, like religion or cult or anything like that, but it really stuck in my head. Like, this is strange. So when I was in high school, the internet became a thing. And I one day was like, oh, Scientology. I can finally maybe figure out what Scientology is about. And I went to their website, and then I couldn't really still figure it out. It was just full of all of these kind of platitudes and vaguely positive things. So that's when I was introduced to the world of, at the time, Yahoo was the search engine to use. And they had a thing called Scientology Opposing Views. And I was like, oh, maybe I can get some info here. And boy, did I ever. That's when I was exposed to the world of people who had left Scientology and the first discussions of, it being a cult. What does that mean? How has it impacted these people who are trying to leave or who have left? And I just became fascinated. And it became not just Scientology, but cults in general, became kind of my little pet interest, that I would read about and research for many, many years, until it became time for me to do my doctoral dissertation. When you're doing one of those, they generally encourage you to start making a list of topics that interest you enough to do a dissertation on them. And that was on there. And eventually the topics got narrowed down further and further. And finally, it was that one in regard to what is it like to do therapy with people who have left a cult? What generally works with them? What doesn't work with them? So that's what my dissertation ended up being. So yeah, it all goes back to Days of Thunder when I was 10 years old.
That movie has so much impact on all of us. I think. Like Aaron, he loves it. Me, I hate it. You, it basically was the entryway into your career, part of your career.
Who knew that a Tom Cruise movie about NASCAR drivers would have such an impact?
It's the Top Gun of NASCAR. Come on, it's great.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
So, as you're talking, it's really interesting to me because, and my curiosity in this discussion too is how you would see the similarities between how people sort of engage in cults and even and diet culture. To me, diet culture seems very like once you're in, you're sort of in, and it's really hard to leave. And I'd love to hear your perspective on how you see the similarities between those two things.
Sure. Well, I want to make it clear before I get into this that I am not saying that diet culture is a cult. It is not a cult in the strictest sense of the word. But what I do see is there are a lot of similarities that diet culture has to cults. In the field of cultic studies, there is no one universally agreed upon set of criteria, to be like, is this group a cult or not? This is the list we use. So I don't really have, the official list because there is no official list. However, there are several different kind of most often used lists of criteria that we judge an organization against to see how much of a cult it might be. So what I've done is I've kind of gone through those criteria and just started to, jotted down some notes and some ideas about the similarities between this criteria and diet culture. And I think that, I am biased. I have a favorite. My favorite set of criteria is the one from Dr. Margaret Singer. And it's a set of 6 criteria. And I'm happy to kind of go through it and talk about, the similarities between, here's this cult criteria and, here's a lot of the ways the diet culture is pretty similar to this.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So the first one is keep the person unaware of what is going on and how they are being changed one step at a time. And the interesting thing about this one is on the surface, the person is aware of what's going on, like intentional weight loss. Like this diet plan or whatnot is trying to help me lose weight, right? That's pretty obvious. Like that's why somebody would do it, right? However, where I see a similarity here is that people are kept unaware of the actual research and statistics about intentional weight loss and how unsustainable it is in the long run, right?
Right. And if you think about each diet that's out there, they say, we work, and then they have zero evidence to support that. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And they're also kept unaware of the research and dangers of weight cycling, eating disorders, weight stigma, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is never given to people in terms of like, in the interest of full disclosure, you should know this. I have yet to run into a diet that does that.
Right.
Yeah. So that, the surface level, people are aware of what they're getting into, but not kind of the below the surface stuff that's going on. So the second criteria is to control the person's social and or physical environment, especially controlling the person's time. And through, just as a caveat to that, through various methods, newer members are kept busy and led to think about the group and its content during as much of their waking time as possible. So this can be similar depending on the diet. Weight Watchers was my gateway diet, like it is for many people. Yeah.
Mine too.
And, Weight Watchers involves going to meetings. Other diets involve meetings. For some people, they become like a gym rat and they're at the gym all the time. And then I would argue that, restriction, which every weight loss plan is built around, restriction does lead to constant thinking about food and the diet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, there might not be as much control over like your physical location, but the mental control that it exerts over you can be huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's why I became a dietitian. I remember thinking like, what job will allow me to think about food all the time and also to diet all the time? And it was like dietitian. That's the word is right in there. So yeah, my whole life at one point was the diet. So that does seem like a similarity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like what you talk to everyone about, right? I mean, like when you're in it, it's like, this is the only thing that I can sort of communicate or connect with anyone around. It's so consuming.
And I was always trying to get people to join Weight Watchers with me.
Right?
Yep.
I'm so ashamed of that now, but yeah.
No, I hear you. So the next criteria, number 3, is to systematically create a sense of powerlessness in the person. And I think this one is, at least in my mind, a pretty obvious comparison. Most diets teach you that you are out of control with food, you are powerless over your unhealthy urges and desires, and that this weight loss plan is the only thing that's going to help you regain power over your life. Yeah, the idea is that without this, you're this, ravenous monster who can't control yourself and who will eat yourself into a body so big it explodes. I don't know. It gets pretty ridiculous.
Right.
Well, it's that your body. I think it's also that your body is something that is meant to be controlled, and
not to be trusted.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, 4 and 5 are they kind of run together, so I'm just going to say them together. So, 4 is you manipulate a system of rewards, punishments, and experiences in such a way as to inhibit behaviors that reflect the person's former social identity. And then 5 is also to manipulate a system of rewards, punishments, and experiences in order to promote learning the group's ideology or belief system and group approved behaviors. So again, kind of echoing back to the first one, I think that experience in a diet is manipulated via keeping people unaware of the actual research and statistics. And then, intentional weight loss is designed to inhibit behavior that reflects a person's former social identity as a person in a larger body. They are all about promoting the group's ideology and belief system and adhering to group approved behaviors.
It's interesting, like, as you're sort of going through these, I've never heard of like of anything that would define sort of what a cult is, right? And we sort of we throw around the word a lot. And it's interesting as you're sort of going through these definitions, because there are obviously some things that are like really close. And what I just think about is, definition aside, I think the feeling of like, if I give this up, like who am I going to be around? Right? Like, who am I going to talk to? What is my life going to be like without this as my narrative? To me, seems like one of those things that is really powerful in the definition, or my definition of what a cult must feel like.
I would agree.
So I think too, what I'm thinking about, my time in Weight Watchers, there was no punishment if I left there by them, except the option was, but then you might be fat. That's sort of like, oh, I'm terrified of that, right? If that's the alternative, like that's sort of my punishment. So in a way, diet culture puts us in charge of our own punishment somehow. And it just cuts the workout for them and just hands it to us. So I guess there's some differences there in what a cult is like, but then it's Aaron, it's like you said, it's sort of like, who am I outside of this?
Yeah,
very much so. And then just to round it out with the sixth one, put forth a closed system of logic and an authoritarian structure that permits no feedback and refuses to be modified except by leadership approval or executive order. And I know that from my experience with different diets, they typically don't allow for a lot of feedback, modification, or questioning. The one that I think is a big offender right now in my mind is, keto, and, ever trying to like question the science behind it or anything along those lines typically does not get you a great response from people who are really into it.
Yeah, that doesn't usually go very well.
Whatever the latest kind of rabidly followed diet is, trying to question it or even critique it lightly in any way is typically not met with like, oh yeah, let's have some other points of view and question the information we have. That would be nice, but that tends to not happen.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's like the person comes up to you and they have to tell you all about their diet, whether you wanted to hear about it or not. And then if you kind of throw anything out, it's like, you just don't know, and it's kind of a rabid defense. And so, and I don't blame that person, because that is the cult-like aspect of diet culture, right? So not a cult, but cult-like aspects of it. Yeah, it's so funny, actually, we're using the word cult. And I remember when I was in Weight Watchers and a coworker of mine said, oh, I'm going to come with you because I see that you're losing weight and I'm going to come with you. And she came and she's like, I cannot attend these meetings. I'm just going to all do it. She said, it's like a cult. And I was like, yeah, of course it is. Yeah. How else does it work? And I was like, yes, I'm fully signed into this cult. I was like, I kind of was aware, of like my behavior at that point, which had become very, very stringent. So yeah, so interesting.
And then just to touch on a few other, without necessarily having to go through any other sets of criteria, but, one significant thing that most cults do is what's called milieu control, which is controlling either your information or your environment. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, being on an intentional weight loss plan does result typically in a significant degree of isolation from those who are not doing it. because I know from my experience with diets that, sometimes it's just easier to stay home than to go out to eat and have to find the right thing that has the macros or not the carbs or the whatever the heck you're doing. It leads you to either isolate or only hang out with other people who are doing that same diet. Which, is not a super pro-social behavior.
Definitely isolating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I hear my clients who, are also in their, eating disorders, but also people who are coming away from just diets. It's like, I couldn't go out and eat with anybody.
Right.
So,
no, I mean, I know that when I was in Overeaters Anonymous, there is a branch of OA called OA How, where it's in Overeaters Anonymous, you don't have there's not one prescribed abstinence plan or food plan. However, in How there is, and it's extremely strict, and it involves weighing and measuring all your food. And I remember, these people have to bring their own food everywhere. Right. And it all, even when I was involved in Overeaters Anonymous, it just struck me as how isolating and othering that is to have to do that.
Yeah. It really does sort of set you apart from everyone, even in the conversations that come up when you go out then, right? Or like, hey, why do you have your food with you? And then,
yes.
Right. But that like sort of leads to this discussion about like, oh yeah, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And then, it's almost like, oh, I want to do that. That sounds, and it seems like it's like almost like something that like both puts people away. Right. But it also like maybe also brings some people in to like see, oh, that's cool. Like that's something I've never tried. I wonder if that works.
Right. Another thing that is often part of a cult is confession. And it's typically, either via a personal monitor or publicly to the group. There's no confidentiality. All of your sins or your faults are discussed publicly and exploited. And that makes me think of like public or group weighing. That is often a part of some groups, or, kind of compulsory sharing of your daily meal plan or calories or macros or whatever. Because, in my mind, it's one thing to have an accountability buddy. It's another thing to kind of feel compelled to have to share this information, and then the shame you must feel when you're not living up to the diet's expectations.
Oh, yeah. I remember sort of the weigh-ins, and also I worked for Weight Watchers for a couple different times. Yeah. Yes, I became a part of the cult system. Yeah, and just sort of the weird kind of like friendly shaming that happens.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, because it was like, it felt like it was, this is so couched in care. And, when I was younger and I first worked for them, I was like, I don't know why you didn't lose weight either. I have no idea. I have a young body that responds to everything right now,
Yeah.
So, but as when I went back the second time, and I didn't work for them very long because then I found health at every size. But, it was just sort of this, it had really morphed at that point. It was just this really sort of hyper, like rah, kind of like it was like it felt like a friendly shaming, are you working the program? It was all, how are you failing at this? Because clearly we have no part in this of the failure,
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I hadn't considered. That is another pretty strong similarity between cults and diet culture. And this isn't necessarily a criteria anywhere, but I see it all the time with the people that I work with, where in cults often, if you are not, making the positive changes in your personal life that you want to be, or if the techniques or the tools that they teach you in these groups aren't working for you, it's never them. It's always you. It's always you're doing it wrong. You're failing at this. There's, you have some sort of sins or faults that are getting in the way. It's never like, oh, well, maybe we should look at these techniques and see if they're actually working for people. There's none of that. And that is such a diet culture thing too. It's never the diet. It's always you. You're failing.
Right. And I want to say that really contrasts with the way I work now, and probably, Aaron, the way you work, which is if this tool I gave you isn't working for you, that might not be the tool for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find another tool. Readily accepting that not everything works for everybody, and willing to accept some responsibility in this, that like, hey, not everything I suggest might work. Let's try something different.
Yeah.
It really is quite different from how of my experience in Weight Watchers, where it's like, here are the limited set of tools and good luck to you.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's how it is. The group that pops to mind for me is Scientology, because I'm not going to get into it because we're not, this is not a podcast about Scientology. I've done those, but their tools, they call them the tech, and it's all like word for word what L. Ron Hubbard created. And no matter what, it is never the tech. It is always you. You are not applying it right or not working it right. And, in diets, it's the same thing. Like, let's say if somebody is doing keto, and, they're not feeling this amazing, like, oh my God, once I got over the keto flu or whatever it is, which sounds terrible, but, I'm still kind of mentally foggy and I'm not feeling amazing like all these people say they are. And it's like, well, you must be doing something wrong. It's definitely not because you're depriving your brain of the fuel it runs on. It can't be that,
No, of course not. Not the huge,
heaven forbid,
physiological changes that you're going through right now.
Yeah, exactly. And then one other significant, two other. One of them is often cults have their own language or vocabulary. Like they will have kind of phrases or terms that have their own meaning in the group, or that are called thought terminating cliches, things that are designed to kind of cut off your critical thinking and just keep you within the confines of the thinking of the group. And that got me thinking of all the phrases that you hear in pretty much any diet. The one that comes to mind for me is like, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips, where it's like, oh, now I guess that's supposed to make me not feel hungry anymore. I don't know. Like,
right. Hunger gone.
Right.
Thanks for saying
right.
that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Now I feel so much better. These little things that are designed to just kind of whip you into shape and get you back on track. So that's one. And then one more that I just wanted to point out is that, oftentimes in cults, the idea is that people who are not in the cult are not saved, they're not enlightened, they're unconscious, and they must be converted to the group's ideology. If they don't join the group or are critical, they must be rejected. It's interesting because when you're doing a diet and you're looking at those who aren't on the diet, especially those who are in bigger bodies, they are often looked at as, oh, these people are not saved, they're unenlightened, they're unconscious, they must be, shown the error of their ways and brought into the diet fold. And if they're not, then are they even really worth connecting with?
There's so many things of what you have said so far that really just sort of obviously the connection to me is really clear. And one of the ones I just want to go back to is this idea of, if you're not in the cult, people can sort of tell. And again, it's not even if you drop out of Weight Watchers, right? But like I hear so many clients say like, I gave up dieting, and because I was suppressing my weight for so many years, I've gained weight back because it's where my body really wants to be. But now I'm having to see friends again who are going to judge me because of my body size, and they're going to say like, what's wrong? Like what's going on? When in reality, nothing's wrong. But like that is that's just diet culture, right? It's like, hey, something must be wrong if you've put weight on as you're going through this process. And I think that's such a powerful motivator for folks, because that there is what keeps them isolated. Like, oh, I don't want to go out because people are going to see me now in this body, and now I don't want to go out. Like now I even more isolated because I'm not doing what they're doing, and they're not going to understand what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point, because there are groups where if you leave, it might not just be that you've left, but it might be, some groups wear specific clothes or, things like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, what if somebody sees me and I'm not wearing my pin or my outfit? What are they going to think of me? I mean, that feels very, very similar to, oh no, what
Yeah.
if I run into somebody from Weight Watchers and they see that I'm in a bigger body now? What must they be thinking of me?
Right.
The body is the sign now of failure.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, failure, shame, like, oh, look where they've fallen. And, it feels very shamey.
I think there's this conventional notion that people just go towards diets for weight loss alone. But do you think there is anything more to it than that? Is there any similarity between what draws people to cults and to diets?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting question, and because I think ultimately that there are similarities, and I think that an issue that is that often comes up when we're talking about why people join cults is that I think this notion is getting dispelled, but it's going to take time. The idea that there are these quote unquote weak-willed or follower type people who get sucked into these groups, when the reality is that's not the case. Just about anyone is at risk for being sucked into a cult. Honestly, what is the biggest risk factor is being in a period of transition in your life. Whether that is going away to college and leaving home for the first time, getting married or divorced, losing a job, the death of someone close to you. And that's because people during times of transition are often looking to get answers and are often looking to, try to just improve their life overall. And I think that the similarity with people who are attracted to diets is that diets offer a very similar sense of like, we have the answers you've been looking for, and this is going to radically change your life for the better. And when you think about it like that, like, who wouldn't want to at least look into that? That sounds pretty good, like. And I think that this is more of a thing with cults than with diets, but the idea that like there's this thing that can fix every aspect of your life if you just do it seems pretty attractive. And yes, diets are ostensibly about shrinking your body, but whether they are more explicit or implicit about it, they're also selling you the message that shrinking your body will improve every other area of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think about when I first joined Weight Watchers, it was a time of huge transition. My mother was very sick. She was in all likelihood going to die. And I was out of work at the time, and I was like, oh, I need something. I was no longer religious, so there wasn't that just didn't feel like an option for me. And I was like, oh, I know, Weight Watchers seems like a good idea. And honestly, I went in there very skeptical, and I was saying, if I can't eat McDonald's, I'm just not going to be interested in this. And, you go in and they're kind of very welcoming, and, they're very kind, and this is the answer. And, you're welcome to the first day of your new life. And I was like, this feels really good.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I'll give this a try, and then kind of getting sucked in. And it was definitely because my personal life was chaos. And then the second time that I went through Weight Watchers again, where I was like, I must get even thinner, I was in a very unhappy relationship at the time. And I was like, I didn't even know that was why I was unhappy. I was like, I need to do this. And so I would always turn to my Weight Watchers as this saving grace for me until it became just torture.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's that whole, and I mean, yeah, I can't blame people for wanting to go towards something that seems to have all the answers, whether it's a diet or a cult, but I think that that's a big similarity between the two, and what draws people in is it's like, just do this and you'll have a better life. Just do this and you'll be happier and healthier. and that's pretty seductive depending on where you're at the moment.
Yeah. My question is, and I don't know if this was a part of the things you dispelled at the beginning, right? But the other thing I hear is this sense of belonging, like wanting to like feel like I'm with some people around something, right? And the importance of connection. And it seems like both cults and diet culture in some way fit into that need of just like, oh, now I have some people that understand what this is about, or I can talk to, or like this is our common existence now. And so now I have this tribe of people that I can be around, and they're part of my identity now.
Yeah, very much so. And, that is a pretty basic human desire, is to be a part of a group, of
Right.
some sort. So I'm not going to fault that, because Lord knows I'm a member of groups. But where it becomes an issue with both cults and diet culture is, okay, it feels nice to be a member of a group and a member of, a group of people who are all working toward the same aim. The issue is that, ultimately the aim of the group, whether we're talking about a cult or a diet, the aim of the group is ultimately not in the best interest of the individual in regard to their physical and or mental health. But agreed, it is a very important human thing to feel like you are in this group of people where you have a common purpose and you're all doing the same thing and can support each other in that. And that is very attractive.
Yeah. And that's what I loved about Weight Watchers, was the group, going to the groups, even though I didn't make friends with really one person in there. Maybe one time I did, but it was like, it was just all kind of sitting there and feeling good together, or feeling bad together, whichever it was that day. But all talking about what the newest 1 Point Trader Joe's products were. I remember that was the San Francisco Weight Watchers. I was like, I'd never been to Trader Joe's, and all people could talk about was like, Trader Joe. Oh, did you see this thing from Trader Joe's? It's only 1 point. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
With the Trader Joe's already. So, yeah.
Obviously, we've sort of drawn some parallels here, and what things do you sort of recommend to the folks listening to even assess whether they think it's diet culture or an actual cult? Like what things do people need to assess to sort of see like, hey, is this something that I really need to be concerned about?
Well, I would recommend the same thing for a cult or for diet culture, honestly, which is to do some research. Because this happens pretty often, given that I specialize in this area. When people come to me and they say, hey, have you ever heard of this group? And I say, if I haven't, I say no. They say, well, do you know if it's a cult? I say, well, let me look into it. So I will go to Google and I will Google around and see if I can find anything that's indicative of, any disgruntled former members. Maybe there's already some literature out there on it, kind of, comparing it to a cult. And that in and of itself, I mean, yes, one could make the argument that probably for any group of people or any sort of religious or spiritual group, there might be people out there saying, oh, it's a cult, and you'll find that online. But it's different finding one or two people versus finding like a website for ex-members and a subreddit for them and, academic articles about how they are very cult-like. So I think that the first thing I would recommend is research. And that's honestly what opened my eyes to diet culture, and I think could open other people's eyes to it as well, is start to do the research. Like, until 4 or 5 years ago, I had no idea that there was research out there showing that 95% of people don't sustain weight loss in the long run, because if you're just going off of what diets tell you, it seems like, oh, most people make this work and the people that don't are fucking up,
Yeah.
But if you actually just start to do a little bit of research and digging with a critical eye, you'll start to see, oh, a lot of this stuff that this industry is telling me is actually quite incorrect. Either way, I would say do some research, do your due diligence. I would say a big red flag, whether it's a group or a diet, is if they tell you not to research it, because there are haters and critics out there. Because it might be worth listening to the haters and critics just to see if what they're saying makes sense to you. So I would say either way, number one is do some research before you plunk down time and money on it.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We have the internet at our fingertips.
Yes, we do.
Should use it. Yeah.
Yes, we do. Absolutely.
And you could still use Yahoo, right? I mean, like, you know, Google's fine, but you could still use Yahoo.
You can absolutely still use Yahoo. It's a personal preference, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Or if you don't want anybody tracking, you can use DuckDuckGo.
There you go. So many options these days. So many more options.
So many options.
Back when I was in high school, it was, Yahoo and Alta Vista, I think it was called.
Yeah, I remember Alta Vista.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
all revealing our age.
Yes, exactly.
Here.
So
Okay.
this day and age, you have so many options to research things. There's really no excuse not to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea to find out things. One thing's interesting. If you try to, if you really try to research Weight Watchers, I think it's hard to find disgruntled people online with it, because everybody feels like if they lost weight and then regained it all, they said, "Oh, it worked." But I failed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it can be hard to find, less hard now because we have Health at Every Size and oriented groups out there where people are much more vocal about that. But yeah, that can be hard to find too. So it's just very interesting that I'm sure cults do some suppressing of that information as well, as much as they are able to. I know some diet companies are pretty good at suppressing that stuff, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just researching a group last night that I hadn't heard of, but that came to my attention, and it was looking pretty culty. But it was interesting because I went to their Wikipedia page and the Wikipedia page of the current person who is in charge of it, and they had clearly very carefully scrubbed and curated their Wikipedia pages to be nothing but, fawning and positive, and not even like a little section on controversy or anything. But, if you do some digging beyond that, arguments can be made that if there's a subreddit for ex-members to discuss their experiences and try to support each other, odds are there's something worth looking at there.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Well, this was incredibly informative, I think, and it was just a fun conversation.
Same here. And thank you guys for having me on. And I want to give credit where credit is due. I hadn't even thought about talking on this topic until I met somebody who I believe has been on your show, Laura Westmoreland.
Yeah.
And when I met with her, she said, "Oh, you should be on their podcast talking about the similarities between diets and diet culture." And I thought, oh, I never even considered that. And then when I met you, Glenys, I just mentioned it to you, and you, to my surprise, you were like, yeah, we should do that.
Yeah. How could that not be an interesting conversation?
Well, thank you. Yeah, it honestly hadn't crossed my mind. So I want to give credit to her for planting the seed for this.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
And thank you, Natalie. And tell us where people can find you.
Sure. So I am online mostly. I have my website, which is drnataliefeinblatt.com. My last name is F as in Frank, EIN, B as in boy, LATT. My social media platform of choice where I am the most active and easily reached is Instagram. And my Instagram is Dr. Natalie F. So it's Dr._Natalie_F. And yeah, you can contact me. I do have other social media, but honestly, I don't check it as often as I do my Instagram. I have my private practice in Los Angeles, California. And then I also see people virtually via video sessions.
That's great. And we'll link to all those ways to contact you. Your website and your Instagram. And I almost forgot, there is a book out there called Diet Cults. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, no, I haven't. I'm going to have to look this up.
Yeah, I can actually loan it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Yeah, or I could get it on Amazon.
The author is Matt Fitzgerald, and this was where I first started thinking about like diets as cults, aside from my friend saying Weight Watchers was a cult like 15 years ago. The irony of, what I say, the author's name, Matt Fitzgerald. And the irony of it is, of course, at the end, he offers his own diet.
Oh, boy.
So he kind of ruined all this great work, right? Instead of saying, just go and figure out how you want to eat. He's like, and here's the healthy way to eat. I'm like, oh, good Lord.
I guess I can just skip the last chapter.
You absolutely can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. The rest of the information is kind of fun.
Okay.
It's a fun and interesting read.
Cool.
So, he might be pulling a gluten lie on us too, because the gluten lie does the same thing at the end of their book, but it's all fake.
Yes.
It's all like a hoax.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. No, I think this guy's diet was like kind of like an earnest attempt at like, here's healthy eating. And honestly, I really didn't look at it because I didn't care. But it is a good read. So if anybody's looking for more information in book format on this, then they can do that. But I'm sure they can also listen to you talk about cults on other podcasts. So
Oh, yes. I've been on quite a few, but this one is the first that has this kind of unique angle to it. So thank you for allowing me to explore that.
yeah, thanks so much for being here.